Today's message, the title is Get Focused and Pray. And the passage comes from Matthew 14, 21 through 33. Matthew 14, chapter 14, verse 21 through 33. This passage comes right after Jesus fed 5,000 men, besides women and children. Matthew 14, 21 through 33. I will read. Please follow along. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," Jesus said. And Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. And those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, Lord Jesus, you are the Son of God." Here's a well-known story of Jesus walking on the water. I think most of you know this story. It's also the story of Peter trying to walk on the water and sinking into the water. And Jesus rebukes Peter for his lack of faith. "You have little faith, why did you doubt?" Did Peter fail? Maybe. However, think about it this way. Peter is the only person other than Jesus who got to experience walking on the water. Isn't that sort of cool? Because I think, can you imagine Peter in front of his grandkids telling the story? Well, actually, I think he was crucified upside down before maybe he had his grandkids. But maybe in heaven, he's sitting around. Maybe he'll tell us, when we get into heaven, then we'll ask disciples questions, and disciples will be telling us all the stories. And then Peter will come along and say, okay, but I'm the only one who got to walk on the water. But so how many of us can say that we walked on water or have experienced any similar miracle? I think it'd be really neat or really great to experience something like that. Why was Peter the only one among the disciples who got to walk on the water beside Jesus? What did Peter do and get to experience that others didn't? And what can we learn from this? There are three things I am going to talk about today. First, Peter got out of the boat. Second, he focused on Jesus. And third, when trouble came, he prayed. So the title of today's sermon is Get Focused and Pray. Get out of the boat, focus on Jesus, and pray. First, Peter got out of the boat. As a fisherman, he was very comfortable in a boat. He was not a fish, so he was not as comfortable in the water. And yet, he got out of the boat. Why? Maybe he wanted to experience walking on the water, maybe. But I'd like to think, I hope, that he wanted to be near Jesus. More than anything else, Peter wanted to be near Jesus. Even though Jesus was coming, he couldn't wait. He wanted to be near Jesus. So he says, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." And Peter obeys. Peter was rash. As you know from other stories, that he was rash, he was hot-blooded and emotional. Often his actions came first before words or thought. But Peter also loved Jesus. His passion for Jesus moved him to take risks and get out of his comfort zone to be nearer to Jesus. Do you love Jesus? Do you love him passionately enough to get out of your comfort zone, to get nearer to him? The Bible is full of stories of men and women who were called or forced to leave their comfort zone so that they can eventually get closer to God. Abraham was comfortable at his home, in his hometown with his relatives, hometown of Ur. Jacob was comfortable at home as a mama boy. Joseph was comfortable at home as a rich kid spoiled by his father. Moses was comfortable as a prince in Egypt. Ruth was comfortable in her home country, Moab. David was comfortable as a shepherd. Daniel was comfortable in his home country as part of the nobility. Peter was comfortable as fishermen. But then they were all called or forced out of their comfort zone. Abraham was called to leave his home and his relatives. Jacob had to leave his mom and never saw her again. Joseph was sold as a slave and forced to leave the protection of his father. Moses had to leave the palaces of Egypt. Ruth left Moab to follow her mother-in-law, Naomi, to Israel. David left the pastures to become a fugitive for 7 years, on the run. Why? Because he was on the most wanted list of the king. The king's most wanted list, not FBI most wanted list. But at that time, he had to go wander through the desert. He had to act like a madman. He had to go into enemy territory, Philistine territory, to survive. Daniel and his friends were forced to leave their noble homes to become servant of Babylon. And Peter was called to leave his boat and nets to follow Jesus. But when they left their comfort zone, they all got to experience miracles in their lives and became closer to God. What is your boat? What is your comfort zone? Is it your home? Is it your room? Is it your circle of friends? Is it your grades? Is it your talent in entertaining others or in music or sports? Is it internet or computer games? Maybe only you know and God knows what that comfort zone is. But sometimes you need to step out of the boat, step out of your comfort zone to experience a miracle, to experience God. For some of you, that may be as dramatic as stepping into the mission field, maybe to join the Albanian Dream Team next year. Maybe that's a bit too far for some of you for just now. But don't worry. You don't necessarily have to go that far, because all of you have a chance today to step out of your boat, of your comfort zone, and get nearer to God. What is it? The STEM Summer Retreat. Emmanuel. God is with us. It's only a month away. And you can register from today. Please sign up. Next week is the last chance to sign up for a discount price of 50,000 won. It goes up to 80,000. It's a chance for you to get out of your boat, especially if you've never, ever gone to a STEM retreat. If there's some of you here been going to STEM, thank you. If you've been coming to STEM for more than a year and have not gone to a STEM retreat, then you need to step out of your boat. You may be saying, excuse me, teacher, but I'm new here and I don't have any friends at STEM. Don't worry. There's some people have been coming to STEM for a long time and they still don't have friends. No. It's just, we're all in the same boat, okay? Some of you are saying, but my parents and Hagwon teachers, they won't let me go. I just know it'll be impossible to convince them to let me go. It'll take a miracle. Well, have a little faith. Jesus says, you have little faith, don't doubt. Try asking your parents. Tell them that you need a break and that you'll study harder if you let them go to the retreat for the 4 days. I promise you, Mom, I promise you, Dad, I'll study harder after I come back. And then keep that promise. Study harder. Usually, if you go to the retreat and if you're blessed, you will study harder because you know why you should study. But I'm scared. I don't want to leave my comfort zone. Jesus says, take courage, it is I. Come. Just obey. Is life more than just staying safe only in your comfort zone? Shouldn't there be more adventure? Don't you want to tell your grandkids that you got out of the boat like Peter did, and you got to experience walking on water, walking on air, meeting Jesus, meeting God? And it's not a 5-year mission that you're signing up for. It's not even a 3-week mission to Albania. It's only 4 days and 3 nights. So be strong and courageous. Step out, sign up for the retreat today, and be ready to boldly experience what no man has experienced before. So first, get out of your boat. Second, Peter focused on Jesus. When Peter got out of the boat, he was focused on Jesus. When he was heading toward Jesus, he had his eyes fixed on Jesus. And when he had his eyes on Jesus, he was able to walk on water. The Bible says he walked towards Jesus. He was walking on water. But then he took his eyes off of Jesus. He looked at the wind. He looked at the waves created by the wind. And when he saw the wind and the high waves and the stormy sea and the turbulent circumstances around him, he got scared and began to sink. We do this. We do get out of the boat, some of us. We do get out of our comfort zone. We do go to the retreat. We see Jesus. We meet Jesus. We get closer to Jesus. We get excited. We feel like we can walk on water. We can walk on air. We feel like we can fly like Superman, like Michael Jordan. I was going to sing here. I can believe I can fly. Oh, well. Others can say to us, are you out of your corn-fed mind? But we experience walking on water when we are looking at Jesus. But then we hear the wind. We get distracted by the crashing waves. And we make that critical mistake. We turn our eyes from Jesus. We look down. We look around. We stare at the stormy sea and the turbulent circumstances of life around us, and we get scared. We become afraid of the storm, afraid of the darkness, afraid of being helpless, afraid of being utterly left alone, afraid of the water, afraid of drowning, afraid of death. Fear grips us. We panic, and then we sink into the cold, cold, freezing ocean. And at such moments we ask, how did I get here? I was doing fine in my comfort zone. And then that teacher came and talked about, stepping out. I stepped out in faith, and I was going toward Jesus, and look what happened. I'm sinking. I'm drowning. Why? What is the storm in your life? What troubles surround you? What is that howling wind and turbulent wave that makes you tremble? What makes you afraid? Is it bad relationships with your friends, with your parents? A bad relationship between your parents? Bad test scores, bad grades, fear of not making to a good college, being a disappointment to your parents, being a failure in life? Are you scared about your health, illness, or an injury you have, or your parents' health? Or do you have fear of being beat up by some thugs or ilchin and their gangs in school? Ilchin? I have no idea what they do. Are you afraid that your life is over because someone is talking behind your back or spreading false rumors or embarrassing truth about you? Or is your fear a bit more mundane? Is it you just wake up and you're horrified that you have pimples that are getting worse, and you fear that they will not go away ever? Or are you scared that you are not attractive enough in this appearance-obsessed world? I was got out of Apgujeongyeok a few weeks ago. There are just so many hospitals in that area. It's just amazing. Or not rich enough in this material obsessed world. Is that your fear? Or are you afraid your life is over because your secret crush for years hates you, or now as a girlfriend or boyfriend? Or are you afraid you will never get married? Do you fear that you will lose your popularity? Are you afraid of being alone? Or do you have the dreaded fear that you will be eating lunch alone? I know some of you just cannot eat lunch alone here. This is something, when I was in U.S., I don't know, we're more used to. Well, I was more used to. But here, I think a lot of you have fear. I can't eat lunch alone. I'd rather starve. Once your focus is off of Jesus and is on such troubles of this world, then don't be surprised if you're paralyzed by fear and find yourself sinking into the sea. So how can you avoid this? How can you avoid sinking like a Titanic into this ocean? You can avoid sinking by focusing and fixing your eyes on Jesus. Let's look up Hebrews 12, chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. Hebrews chapter 12, 1 through 2. While you're looking up Hebrews chapter 12, 1 through 2, Hebrews chapter 1 through 10 is mostly theology about Jesus Christ being supreme, that he is God's final supreme revelation and mediator of God's grace. Then Hebrews chapter 11 is a famous chapter on Bible's Hall of Fame, a Hall of Faith. It's a memorial of illustrious men and women of faith in Bible, including Noah, Abraham, Moses, etc., referred to as a great cloud of witnesses that went ahead of us. And then from Hebrews chapter 12, there are more practical exhortations for us to follow, sort of like in Romans, where I have all these theology, and then Romans chapter 12, it's like, therefore, brothers, offer yourselves as living sacrifices. And it gives you a lot of practical things to follow. In the same way, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 through 2 says this: therefore, we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. The author, some versions, newer versions, says pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Since there's a great cloud of witnesses, a hall of fame, hall of faith of sunbiz in the Bible surrounding us, we should also have faith in God. We're to throw off everything that hinders, including sin, and then to run the race, the Christian race, living the life, walking the talk as a follower of Christ, while fixing our eyes on Jesus. We should have faith in Jesus like all of the Hall of Famers in Hebrews chapter 11. So that instead of Jesus saying, oh, you have little faith, why did you doubt? So that we can hear when we're in heaven, Jesus coming up to us and he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have great faith. Not what you want to hear. What do you know, there are a lot of people in sports, what do they live for? They want the championship. You know, in Stanley Cup in hockey in U.S., they win, and it's the Stanley Cup they raise up. And Michael Jordan, when he first won his NBA championship, that O'Brien trophy with a basketball on it, you know, for like 6 years he couldn't win, or 6 or 7, 8 years, and they called him a ball hog. It's because he's a ball hog, he can't win. When he won, he was crying, and he was hugging that thing and cursing, and he was crying because, you know, finally he had won it, and then he won six times later. But it's that trophy and the honor. Right? He's already rich. It's not the money anymore. It's that honor. But you know, what is that trophy? What is that worth? That trophy itself isn't worth anything. It's the honor. What do you live for? When you go to heaven, don't you want Jesus to go in front of billions in heaven? Welcome. My good and faithful servant. Well done. That. In Revelation, it talks about crown of, you'll receive a crown, and then you lay it before Jesus because he deserves the glory. But basically, it's if Jesus is to come to you and just say, well done. I know most of you you just want to please your parents. You want your parents to say, well done. And that's why you study so hard. But think of God saying, well done to you. But maybe you are saying, excuse me, teacher, pardon me, but you do not know the trouble I'm going through, the hardships I'm facing. The storms of my life, you don't understand. It's not just waves and wind. It's like class 5 hurricane. You don't know the sufferings I'm going through. If God is with us, if Jesus is near me, why am I in so much pain? Why is there so much suffering around me? Again, look at Hebrews 12:2. It says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. Is there greater suffering than the death on the cross? Jesus also had suffering and pain in his life. He endured his suffering. But for the joy set before him, for the joy of saving millions and millions like us, he endured that suffering. He endured the cross. Other examples in the Bible. Joseph, he endured slavery and did not sin against God when tempted by Potiphar's wife. He endured prison but did not curse God. He had his eyes focused on God. He knew that even in prison, God was with him. He eventually learned that he needed to endure the suffering so that later he might become second to Pharaoh and save his family from the 7 years of famine. David, for the joy set before him, endured being a fugitive for 7 years, being besieged by his enemies. Look up Psalm 27, 1 through 5, where David speaks. Psalm 27, 1 through 5. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and seek him in his temple. For in the day of trouble, he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his sacred tent and set me high upon a rock. Even when besieged by his enemies and armies that advanced to devour him, David was not afraid. Why? Because he really believed. He had faith that God was with him. And he asked only one thing of God, to dwell in God's house, so that he can be with God all the time, and to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him. David wanted to fix his eyes on the beauty of the Lord. Gaze on the beauty. Now that's a phrase you will understand only if you've been in love. When I was in 7th grade in U.S. in Los Angeles, I attended a Korean American church. And I had a crush on a girl in 8th grade in my church. Yes, 연상녀. But nowadays, I guess 기성용 is marrying someone 8 years older. So, and don't laugh, that crush for me lasted like 4 years. I would come to Friday night Bible study, not to gaze on the beauty of the Lord, but to gaze on the beauty of my crush. My dad, he was a pastor of the church, but he didn't have to force me to come to church for Friday night Bible study. I was happy just to be near her and be in the same room with her radiating glow on Sundays and Friday evenings. But it was only a crush. I never even got a chance to tell her I liked her. And the crush was gone. But much later, when I was in college in U.S., I was actually at home preparing a slideshow for my church college group. In those days, I'm pretty old. In those days, we actually had these that was called slideshow because they're slides. You had these square paper things, and then you had the film. And basically, these square things fit into this reel, and you'd put in 50 of them, and then you put it onto a projector. Yeah, it's pretty kind of, anyways. And the projector would project, and each slide would go in, and the wheel would turn, and then you would have to separately prepare music so that, anyways. So I was doing that, never mind. And I was preparing the slideshow for the college group. There was a girl who was leaving our church, going back to Korea from U.S. And when her photos hit the screen, because I was doing it at home, it was the wall, I was suddenly mesmerized and enchanted by her beauty. Now, she had been in our college group department for 3 years. And I was friends with her, and we had spent a lot of time together. In fact, first time I met her, I didn't like her, and she didn't like me, and it was a long story, but another time for that. But only when she was leaving the college department, leaving U.S., did I really realize this. And but nevertheless, she and I, we got to talking on February 11th, 1989, a week before she was leaving the country, that we liked each other. Why do I remember the date? Because that girl later became my wife. Well, she's my wife now. So, yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that when you love someone, that person becomes beautiful to you. And you want to continue to look at that person. You want to stare at the beauty of that person. You want to be near that person. You may already be close to that person. You want to be even nearer. When you love Jesus, you want to look at him, and you want to be near him. Peter looked at Jesus. He wanted to be near him. David loved God and just wanted to be near God, dwell in his house, and gaze on his beauty. Are you in love with Jesus? Do you want to be near him? Are you happy when you're coming to church to see God and meet with God? If not, you should ask yourself, do I really love God right now? How can you fall in love with God if you're not spending time with him? Do you want to fall in love with God but don't know how to spend time with him? Well, then stop worrying, because there's a wonderful opportunity for you to get to know God and fall in love with him. And some of you guys already know. What is it? STEM Summer Retreat. Our theme this year is Emmanuel, God with us. You will spend time with him, with God, and increase the chances of you falling in love with him. So first, get out of the boat. Second, focus your eyes on Jesus. Third, when in trouble, pray. Peter prayed when he found himself in real trouble. When Peter looked at the wind, he became afraid and began to sink. But when he began to sink, Peter said the quickest, powerful prayer there is, Lord, save me. And Jesus reached out and caught him and picked him up and saved him. Peter could have tried to swim back to the boat, to his comfort zone. Instead, he reached out to Jesus with the shortest prayer. When you're looking at the winds and the circumstances around you, and the troubles just overwhelm you, and doubts creep in, you're sinking in the worries and fears, then sometimes the honest, simple prayer is all you need. Lord, help me, save me. And as the last story, let me tell you a story of my dad's short prayer when he was in trouble. My father was born in 1933 in a small town called Janghung in Jeollanam-do, which is South Jeolla province. So, my grandfather passed away when my father was young, so my grandmother moved her back to her hometown in South Gyeongsang province. And when my father was 17 years old, he was born in 1933, 17 years old, which means in 1950, he was attending Jinju High School in Jinju City. The Korean War broke out in June 25th, year of 1950, 60 years ago. By mid-July, or 63 years ago, by mid-July, the Inmingun, or the North Korean People's Army, had pushed the front line far south. At that time, the Prime Minister of South Korea, Bum Seok-lee, and National Assembly Chairman Iki Shin Iki, came to the city of Jinju to calm down the South Korean citizens trembling in fear. They gave a big talk to the citizens not to fear, as they assured that the UN forces have landed in Busan, and together the South Korean army will soon push the North Korean army up north, and soon Korean Peninsula will be unified under Southern control, South Korean control. However, 4 days after that speech, the city of Jinju fell under the control of the North Korean People's Army. It happened so fast that many people were not able to flee or evacuate quickly enough to Busan. My father was one of them. In the chaos that ensued, as everyone was evacuating, my father fell asleep at someone's house after a day or two of fleeing. They were all tired. When he woke up, he realized that he was alone and that now he was behind enemy front line. He knew that as a young man, if he was caught by the North Korean army, that he would immediately be placed on North Korean people's army and taken to the front lines and become part of the human shield, 총알바지, to take the brunt of the enemy's bullets instead of the North Korean army. So basically being captured by the North Korean people's army, if they didn't kill you, they would take you to be killed in the front lines. My dad says that there's a saying, actually my dad said that there's a saying, there's no atheist in a foxhole. With bullets flying overhead, my father prayed for the first time in his life. He said, God, save me. If you save me, I will believe in Jesus. He got out of the house and he started running through the ridge between the rice paddies. It was July, so the rice plants had grown, I guess, I'm not sure, waist or shoulder height. So to avoid being seen, he had to bend himself down like this and ran. And if you ever tried to run like that, you can't do it for a long time. So after what seemed like forever, his back was hurting, and he was quiet, so he decided to slowly get up and take a look around. So he kind of went like this, and there was a North Korean soldier right there. 동무 이려라. So comrade, come here. And so he was taken captive and soon was taken to the front lines, handed over to another North Korean soldier who had the reins of an ox pulling a cart. So they were going towards the front line, and my dad knew that once they reached the front line, it was probably over for him. So he tried to think up something really quick to delay the trip. And he said, he would take over the reins of the ox, pulling the cart. So he took over the reins. It was a rope that was tied, long rope tied to the nose ring of the ox, pulling the cart. And then my dad started telling his stories. My dad is a pastor. He's a very good storyteller, and I guess he was a very good storyteller then. So he started telling these stories, and this young North Korean soldier, who was young as well, really got into the stories. So into it that he didn't notice my dad was slowly giving more slack to the rope. And as there was more slack to the rope, the ox started meandering to the side of the road where there's grass. So the ox started eating the grass on the side, and then soon, crash, the cart flipped over to the side of the road. So the North Korean soldier panicked. He comes over. He's like, oh, he's got to try to lift and upright the cart. My dad comes over. He's doing a very good acting job. He's like, he's acting like he's lifting it, but he's not really, he doesn't want to help him. So they couldn't, upright the cart, so they had to wait. They had to get more North Korean soldiers, get more North Korean, and they came and finally upright. By that time had passed. So the North Korean soldier took my father to a Korean Hanok house where there were many other North Korean soldiers sleeping all over the wooden floor in the middle of the house. There my father also acted like he was sleeping too. Then when he thought all of them were sleeping from exhaustion, but he wanted to make sure, and there was a dog in the yard, so he picked up a little rock, threw it at the dog, and the dog barked, and then there would be like some of the North Korean soldiers like, and they start cursing the dog. And then, so he would wait another long time, threw another rock. This time none of the soldiers, got up. So my dad said, okay, this is it. He ran to the wall, jumped over the wall, and then he just ran without looking. He doesn't know how long he ran until he was up on a mountain. He got into a mountain, into the forest. He dug a cave, more like a hole in the ground, put leaves around him, and he stayed there for 3 months, living on herbs and roots. Sometimes he was able to get some grandmothers or ajummas down in the town, got food for him, apparently. But he survived 3 months, and then the UN forces pushed North Korean army up, and then he was freed and he was saved. They said he looked like, so he lived like Robinson Crusoe or Kim Byung-man in Jungle Book Chicken, and he had beard. He was all dirty. But my dad was saved, and he kept his promise. He believed in Jesus. He became a pastor, a seminary professor, and preaching the importance of missions. My dad had prayed when he was in trouble, and like Peter, God had saved them both. And I'm glad God saved my dad, because I wouldn't be right here right now speaking to you if God didn't. Are you in trouble? Then pray to God. He will listen to an honest prayer. Let me conclude today by summarizing this message today. First, get out of the boat. Get out of your comfort zone. Second, focus on Jesus and come near to him. Third, pray. And you can do all this by coming to the retreat. Okay, to some of you, it may feel like this whole message has been a long announcement for summer retreat. But I'm emphasizing this because summer retreat is where I personally really met God and got closer to him and gained faith and assurance that I was born again, that I was God's child, and that God really loved me. And that's where my love for Jesus really grew. So I seriously encourage each and every one of you to go to this retreat and as many retreats as possible, because you never know in which one you'll really meet God and experience walking on water. What was the end result in this passage after the disciples saw that what Jesus did? The disciples gained faith. They realized Jesus was God. How do we know? In verse 32 and 33, it says, when they climbed back into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you're the Son of God. The Jewish people did not worship anyone other than God. When they worshiped Jesus, they were saying, Jesus, you're God. Come to Jesus. Come to the retreat. Meet God and fall in love with him. You can't do that unless you spend time with him. Let me finish with these verses. 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18. God says through Apostle Paul, therefore do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Let's pray. Dear Father, help these beloved young and women realize that what we see is temporary, what is unseen is eternal, that all our troubles in this world is temporary, but that Jesus, you are eternal, that our love for things of this world can only be temporary, but our love for you, Father, and your love for us is eternal. So help us to get out of the boat, our comfort zone, to focus our eyes on you and to get nearer to you. Help us to stop focusing on the troubles of this world and start focusing on you. Help us to fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, and to fall in love with you and to experience your awesomeness so that we can fall down to worship you as you deserve. In Christ's name we pray.